Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traversing the Stars podcast. Today's special guest is Ryan Parrott. You know him as the writer of Rogue Sun from Image Comic Books. Now, come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Parrott. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
My pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. So, I read that you recently joined what's called the Black Market Narrative Universe, which is part of Image Comic Books. Can you kind of explain what that is a little bit and how long have you been involved within this universe?
So Black Market Narrative is Kyle Higgins' sort of corner of the Image universe. It's sort of what his shingle that he produces all his projects through. And Kyle started Radiant Black with Image, I think maybe a little bit over a year ago. Kyle, I knew Kyle from college, and we'd been doing Power Rangers with each other for, I don't know, for years. And so he was sort of like, hey man, like, are you interested in like doing a superhero book at Image? And I was like, what? I can do that? You're like, yeah, you're gonna let me do that? He's like, yeah, man, if you have an idea. And so I was like, yeah, I got this one idea. And I pitched him the log line. He was like, we should do that. That's great. And so that's where it started. And we've been developing for about a year. It just finally started getting going. And yeah, it comes out March 2nd. Yes.
So the interesting about Image Comic Books is that it is known as a creator-owned company. Every creator owns the rights to their comic book. So within the Radiant Black universe, you have Rogue Sun. Is Rogue Sun then yours?
Yeah.
Or is it part of? Okay, so you're independently owned a character within an independently owned character within Image.
Yeah, sort of. I think the way I look at it more is that like Rogue Sun's mine. It's not Kyle's. It's the fact we just thought like in the same way that like Eric Larson owns Savage Dragon and Todd McFarlane owns Spawn, and those two guys can interact with one another, and they're in the same Image universe, but they don't. They both own their own guy. That's the way we treated it because we wanted it to sort of be sort of we wanted to kind of be the same thing. We wanted to sort of follow in the footsteps of the Image founders in the same way that they created their world and were able to sort of talk to each other and stuff. We wanted to do the same thing. And what's easy about it is because we're all friends, me and Matt Groom, who has another, the Inferno Girl Red, who's in it, and Kyle, like we all know each other. So it's really easy to write our own books and still sort of play in the same universe because we like just sort of let each other know. We're not, it's not Marvel or DC, which has so many characters that you have to in different, departments and all that stuff. I can literally go, hey, Kyle, I want to use an action figure that was in your third issue. Can I use it in here? He's like, yeah. So, or say screw off and that kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Well, I mean, I remember when Image first came out, when it was, you had McFarlane with Spawn, you had Wildstorm with Jim Lee, you had Robert Liefeld's Extreme Studios, and each one, and I remember, was it Youngblood 10 when you had Spawn show up with Chapel, and that whole interaction right there, and that must have been one of the coolest days of Image because it was still indie, but there was this huge kind of intertwining playground that was a part of that indie world, and I just remember loving that a lot.
No, yeah, I mean that's exactly why I wanted to do this because like I was the same age. I was 13 when it came out, Image started, and I was like, I love these books because what I thought was so cool to me was I was seeing them from the ground up. Like I as when you pick up any Batman, Superman book, any X-Men book, there's so, if you want to know about those characters, there's so much material that's impossible to read it all. I mean, and what I liked so much about with Youngblood was like with Youngblood and Wildstorm and all that stuff, I was like, I remember when I found out, and spoiler alert to anybody who hasn't heard this, I apologize in advance, it's Spawn. When I found out that Chapel was the one who killed Al Simmons and made Spawn, I was like, what? Like I thought that was so cool because I love that they were interconnected in these small little ways, and it felt like I was learning it in real time. It felt like I could learn everything, and I loved that. And I think that's one of the things that we were excited about was, right now in these early days, if you want to jump on, that's why we created Supermassive, which is the crossover event that's sort of starting this all off. Was we're like, how can we create a moment for someone to jump on, read one book and understand everything they need to learn about our universe, as opposed to going, okay, if you want to know about the superhero book, you got to go read these 12 issues and that 12 issues and listen to this podcast and read that annual comic book and talk to this person. And, we don't have to do all that. You just read one book and you're in.
And, and I remember, I think it was similar to your age. I was born in 1980. So right around the same age when Extreme Studios came out. And I used to just love Extreme Studios. And when they did Extreme Prejudice, Extreme Sacrifice, which I love Extreme Sacrifice to an insane degree. I still have read those stories over and over again. And I thought one of the things that was amazing about those stories is that anything could happen. There wasn't like Batman and Superman where you're like, you kill off Batman, you're bringing Batman back. That's all there is to it. Batman's coming back because you don't lose Batman. In Extreme Studios, when they killed off pretty much the entire Bloodstrike team, they're gone. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, like, characters die so regularly, and it was shocking each time because you knew, well, maybe they won't bring that character back because it's, you know, these characters aren't well known anyway enough that there's not like 1,000 of licensing deals affecting it, you know?
Yeah.
When
which I think is even funnier though when you realize that the entire Bloodstrike team was already dead.
Yeah. But I mean, I remember, was it the second or third time they killed Supreme? Because he seemed to die after every major event. Well, you had Quantum, you had Crypt kill him, and it was all. But and I remember like being like shocked each time, like I can't believe they did that. Yeah, Crypt was one of my favorites.
That's one of the best designs. I loved Crypt. Crypt was awesome. Yeah.
Crypt, Lord Chapel. Remember that issue? Where
Can we just talk about Image Extreme for like an hour? Let's do that. I'm in. Yeah.
But like I said, I was such a nerd. Like, oddly enough, like that came out of like, the perfect time of my preteen years where it was influential. Like the fact that Lord Chapel went from this character I knew in one comic book to like the leader of this of hell. I was like, holy! I didn't know that was a thing. You could do that.
Yeah.
But the point of my long-winded story is that Extreme and Wildstorm exist in a world where anything was possible. With Radiant Black's universe being, or do we call it Radiant Black universe, or is it the Super?
We've been calling it the Massiveverse just because, you know, just so Kyle doesn't own everything. Yeah.
So in the Massiveverse, is there a sense when you're creating this Massiveverse with these new characters, are you trying to make it so everything is possible and still shocking, or is there kind of like DC, Marvel? You know, these characters are, you know, nothing really can happen to that character. You have to have, you know, these characters survive and all that other stuff.
Well, I think some of it, yes. I mean, I don't think we are designing it in the efforts of like trying to be shocking and surprising in that sense. But I think there's definitely, I mean, Kyle and I have talked about this a lot just from working in Power Rangers. It's like Power Rangers, as awesome and as fun it is to work with those characters and play with those voices, that is great. But there is a very specific limit to how far you're allowed to take those characters, what you're allowed to do, and how far you're allowed to veer off, right? And I feel like because of the restrictions of that book, those books, we very much wanted to create a world where we could go in different directions and that you didn't know where the story was going. And specifically, I think because whenever you create a brand new superhero, you know, like readers have, I've said this before, but readers have, if they want to read a superhero book, they have a lot of options and they have plenty of characters that they already know they like and characters that they're already invested in. So if you're going to bring a new character into the game and you're going to say, I want you to pick this one over, spend your $5 to $7 on this one, as opposed to a character you know you're going to already like, I owe them something different, something subversive, something unexpected, and a story that is not is a different type of story. Because otherwise I don't know how I'm going to be able to compete. So that was part of it also, is like, that's one of the things that I think Kyle has done a wonderful job of Radiant Black, is you really don't know where that story's going. And he keeps finding new ways to sort of flip it and use the medium in different ways and change characterizations. And I like the way he's raised the bar a lot. And so for me, coming in and behind him and seeing how successful that's been, I definitely want to try and follow in those footsteps.
So, like, as you were saying, the idea that there's a lot of superheroes out there, a lot of shared universes. Once again, DC, Marvel, Valiant, now Spawn, I guess, is a shared universe now, considering he has 4 titles. Is the unpredictable nature what distinguishes your universe from everything else that's out there right now? Or what else is the distinguishing factor of your universe?
I would say the 2 ways I would do it is, one, we are it's a shared universe by a bunch of friends. And because of that, I think that's helpful. It allows for a lot of less red tape and a lot more freedom and a lot more fluid. And like, the fun thing is we all know where our stories are all going. And so when I know where Kyle's story is going and he knows where my story is going, so what's really great is there's these moments when that parts that you didn't expect go, oh, well, wait a minute, your story to it, in this issue, this happens, and in my issue, this happens. What if they connected in a weird way? Or what if this moment is big enough to be felt through all the other titles, so that they're all their own independent stories, but they are rippling and close enough together that the ripples will affect one another. And that's one thing that we can do that I don't necessarily know if Marvel and DC and all those guys can do, because they're so big. Like the advantage is being smaller and more compact. And then the other thing I would say about it is like we're also part of the Image universe. Like Spawn could show up in my book if Todd felt like that I was worthy of playing in the same playground, because we're all in the Image universe. And so like that's the fun part about this too, is I think we're starting off in small, we're doing our own stories in our little corner, but hopefully over time, if we are there's a character in my comic book named Dylan who's desperately looking for the validation of his father, and I feel like I'm that guy desperately looking for the validation of the Image founders, going like, am I worth you hanging out with? So that like it's that part. Yeah.
Like that is awesome. The interesting about comic book creators, and I'm one on a very indie level, and maybe it's just me, but I don't know, but I'm a very vain individual about certain things that I create. And being that you guys are all playing together with your own characters, is there a certain level of vanity that pops in when they're like, well, my character needs, to be the one who is victorious in this situation, or you're like, my character does this thing in my story that, radiates across all the other characters. And they're like, no, that's not fair. My character is too good for, my character's not gonna hit my character. I have my own plans. I mean, is there any kind of conflicts where each person who feels more ownership over their character and exerting it over other people's characters' universes, is there any kind of like rivalry, or my character can't impact because I want my character to be the guy, or that kind of thing?
Right. I would say we're still in the honeymoon phase, so probably not. Like we're all still respectful and like, oh no, man, you first. No, you first. Like we're very much in that zone. So ask me again in a year. But I would say I think the cool thing about it is, usually when you write a story, like you have your main character and then you have all your side characters. No characters are there to support the main character story, right? That's usually how that works. But what's really fun about doing crossovers and shared universe is that all of our characters, like, Radiant Black and Inferno Girl Red and Rogue Sun, they're all the main characters in their own story. So when they interact with each other, you have to think about the perspective of all of them in a different way. And so you have to kind of play fair with the audience a little bit. You know what I mean? Like it's like, that like I have to be fair with, like, Kyle's got his story that he wants to tell with that character, and he's going to hit those marks. And I've got I have a story I want to tell with Rogue Sun, and I'm going to hit those other marks. So what you do in a lot of ways is you find these interesting compromises that help you break free of cliches and help you break free of predictability, I think, in an interesting way.
So just to end this honeymoon, I'm going to ask the question of which character is stronger, and just make it all star. But yeah. You're welcome to actually answer that question, but I was more just being a dick on my side, I guess. No, but interesting enough, like I said, these characters are being introduced in the one shot called Supermassive.
Yes.
Which, other than Radiant Black, you're having multiple characters being introduced in this one major storyline, which is kind of like this massive jam section between, like I said, Higgins and a bunch of the other artists involved. I think you said Max Room is in there as well.
Yeah.
So what is the difficulty in trying to introduce a new character in this massive storyline where other new characters are also being introduced, making sure that you both serve the story, but also you got to create a immediate connection with a character for this audience who hopefully will then follow them to Rogue Sun, the original, the actual title when it starts.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, so we'll find out if I'm successful. But the way that we approached it, at least the way that I approached it, was I remember when I would read like when I would reading Batman when I was a kid, or Spider-Man when I was a kid, and I remember when somebody new would come into the story, like somebody that I didn't know. For instance, like if Swamp Thing wandered into Batman, what you usually had to do in those stories is you either had to there was usually a sort of an introduction of the character, so you get a sense of who they are, because I think older comics were much more aware of like everybody's comic is the first comic, so they have to sort of reintroduce people in sort of specific ways and give you the exposition so it makes sense. I think nowadays we're a little more like, okay, people get it, they'll figure it out. But back then that was the case. And so what I liked about that was this idea that like everybody's comic is their first comic. So I just approached it that way. I just thought like, okay, if Rogue Sun is going to appear in an issue of Radiant Black, how would I introduce him in a way that if this person had never picked up an issue of my other book, they would know who this character is, what they want, and what they're doing. And so that's the way I think we approached all of it, was just sort of writing it a little bit like an old school Marvel or DC crossover, where it's like everything you need to learn about the character, you'll know in the context of it. And like, if you like that character enough and you find them interesting enough, hopefully you will follow them in the next book, but you don't necessarily have to. Yeah.
But they should, God damn it.
I agree. Yeah.
This question might be a slight spoiler. So if it does hit that way, welcome to tell me edit it out, but I'm gonna ask the question anyway. Supermassive and Rogue Sun release, I believe, the same day.
No, it's Supermassive comes out February 23rd, and Rogue Sun comes out March 2nd.
Okay, so Supermassive comes out first. Having had the opportunity, and thank you so much for letting me read the first 2 issues, I'm gonna try to think the best way to answer this question without ruining too much. Is the version of Rogue Sun in Supermassive the one we're gonna get used to seeing in Rogue Sun, or is this an earlier version of Rogue Sun that we haven't quite got comfortable with yet?
I think it's probably okay to spoil it. So yeah, in Supermassive, but I appreciate your candor and delicate nature of handling that. Because like I'm also like, how much do you want to spoil? But also I also feel like I want to tell people enough to get them interested in the book. You know what I mean? Like, I'm never a person who's just like, oh, trust me, it'll be good. Like, they don't know me. Like, come on. So you got to get people in there and get excited about it. And also, it's a comic book. Hopefully, it'll be around long enough that there'll be a lot of story and not just the first issue. And you're like, oh, that's all I needed to know.
I'm sure they will because you're on this show. So damn right.
Hopefully, yeah. But yeah. So in Supermassive, you were following a character named Marcus Bell, who is been Rogue Sun for several decades and has protected the city of New Orleans for a while. When you follow him when you pick up Rogue Sun #1, you will find out very quickly that the character you're following there is his son Dylan. And how he got the power, and I guess I can say it. Unfortunately, Marcus is going to pass away very quickly, and he's going to leave his mantle to Dylan in the first issue. And Dylan is not like his father. Marcus left his kid when he was 2 years old and never talked to him again. And so he has some mixed feelings about the man who he didn't know was a superhero and is leaving him his superpowers, and has to learn about that the guy he's hated his entire life in order to become a hero. That's the premise of Rogue Sun. So what we liked a lot about Supermassive was that you could learn a little bit about the hero before and understand who Marcus was a little bit more, and sort of hopefully enjoy him as a character, so that when Dylan takes over, you can see a contrast between the two characters.
Well, I want to say, because I didn't know that part of was Supermassive, because I read the first 2 issues that you sent over. Mm-hmm. That's pretty damn cold, because I read the first issue. I was like, he shows up, Marcus is up for, I think, 3 or 4 pages yeah. I didn't know you introduced him an entire storyline and just to kill him off. That is cold, man. Yeah. That's cold.
You gotta get, you kill your babies, right? Yeah.
So the death of Marcus in the first issue, I imagine now it's even more shocking knowing that he was the character from Supermassive. Because like I said, I took it as the first issue where you didn't know who he was, but you already have introduced him as Supermassive, and then killed the guy off in 4 pages after we got used to got to like the character apparently. How integral and how much does that death of Marcus haunt the entire series?
Oh, I mean, it's the focal point of the entire story. I think the idea of, I mean, in a weird way I looked at it was, I didn't feel bad about you not knowing a ton about Marcus in the beginning, because what that does hopefully is put you in the same spot as Dylan, who doesn't know his dad, only knows this guy left a long time ago and dislikes him. And so in order to sort of learn his powers, he's going to have to learn about who this guy is. So hopefully the audience is learning about him at the same speed and same tempo. So that's the way I liked it. I thought it would allow you to sort of be in Dylan's shoes a little bit more, and hopefully, make your own judgments and choices at the same speed, and understand why he makes his choices.
So what is the Sunstone? Because the Sunstone powers the Rogue Sun. What is that? What are the powers? Are we talking like a Superman kryptonite? Is there a weakness to it? Can you tell us, and when are we gonna learn more about his origins?
I will. Some of those I can answer, some of those I can't. Okay. I will say this: the Sunstone is obviously very, very important and has a long and very complicated backstory, and also has is very important to the story going forward. I know that's very cryptic, but that's the best way I can explain it. Yes, you will learn a lot more about that, how it works, where it came from, and what it does. The power set is pretty standard for some superheroes in a sense. Since Dylan is flying around in like a giant flaming suit of armor, he's got flight, he's got super strength and protection, and then there's several other elements that come with the character that also will be revealed throughout the book. That's one of the things I liked about the idea, was that when Dylan gets the powers, he doesn't entirely know what does where and how to do what and all that stuff like that. So as he's learning about the suit, we'll learn about the suit. And as to its weaknesses, obviously, if you read the first 4 pages, it has a severe weakness, and how that works, I cannot tell you, but that will be revealed within the first 6 issues. So I'll just tell you that.
To reference another superhero that it kind of reminded me of a little bit. I don't know if you know of Kyle Rayner when he was first introduced to the world of Green Lantern, where those first 10, 15 issues were him learning to be that superhero, learning the powers, learning the history. Is that a similar feel that's Rogue Sun's gonna have, where it's literally someone learning on the job, kind of screwing up just as much as they're being successful?
Yeah, hopefully. I'm going to do that, but I'm just not going to fridge his girlfriend. That's the only thing I'm not going to do. But yeah, that's definitely, I mean, Kyle Rayner's, that runs a very important, like I would say that's a very close thing. I also was thinking about, and I'm going to mess up his name, who did it, who wrote the Robin miniseries? Was it Wolfman, or is it somebody better? I'm gonna blank on this, but you know what I'm talking about, the one with the red cover with the thing. It's so funny. I love that series, and I'm like, I can't remember the writer's name, but like I really loved that run. I that little miniseries, and that one was a very influential sort of thing too. And that, because I love that idea of sort of like the hero, the sidekick suddenly on his own, trying to figure out how to do it, and so like that's kind of the same way I wanted to play it. Like, yeah.
Well, I think what's interesting about your main character of Dylan, and I don't know if I've ever seen it this way before, or presented this way. Dylan is kind of an asshole.
Oh, he's a big asshole.
I mean, when you, I'm trying not to go into too many details, but this character called Byron, that he's very much.
You can tell him. You can tell him. It's okay.
Where Dylan is very much the bully in the story. He's mean to Byron. He has a somewhat oddly friendly kind of sort of thing, but when you jam a kid in the locker, you're the bully. When we were threatening kids to do your work that don't do your work for you, you're the bully. Now, what does that mean for him as Rogue Sun, that you literally, most of us are used to the Peter Parker story where the nerd gets the powers and becomes the hero, but now it's Flash Thompson who gets the powers and becomes the hero.
Yep.
What does that mean for Rogue Sun?
That's exactly what I wanted to do. And I've said this 1,000 times. It's kind of my new call phrase for this, because I think it's a good way to look. Most superhero stories follow when a bully pushes a kid in the locker, most superhero stories follow the kid in the locker. Yes. I wanted to follow the kid on the outside, because I thought, like, in the same way you asked earlier question, which was like, how can this story differentiate itself from all the other superhero stories you're seeing? It was like, well, Flash Thompson is a really interesting character when you start to dig into why he is a bully and why he is the way that he is. And when you start to finally dig into that, like in the same way, like a character like Draco Malfoy, when like he's, when you meet him, he's just an asshole. But then when you meet his parents and you see his place inside the Death Eaters and everything, all of a sudden he feels like you start to understand him, and I think some people sympathize with the guy, and he's always an asshole. And so here's the way I looked at it was, this is actually, I have not told the story before, but what you said reminded me of this. So when I was in 4th grade, I remember we had a bus that would take us to school each day, and I was the last stop. So when I got on, the bus was already full, and it was usually just me and like one other kid. And I remember I went in the back of the bus one time, and I sat down, and one of the bullies started flicking my ear from behind me, and he's bigger than me, and I was a little kid, and I couldn't do anything if I tried to push him and stop him. And I just sat there and took the flicking of the ear and started crying. And another kid who was messing up with another boy saw that, stopped the other bully. And I remember told me, he's like, don't worry, someday you're going to get to do the same thing. And I thought, what a weird, and here's the thing, 25 years later, I'm still remembering that. And I remember thinking, oh, he doesn't think what he's doing is wrong. He thinks this is sort of rite of passage. This is what happened to him, and he's going to get to do it to someone else, and then that kid's going to do it. Like, he didn't think what he was doing was evil. He just saw it as, this is the way things are. And I never forgot that. And I thought that would be an interesting way to look at Dylan, this idea of a kid who has lived a certain way because he's never had somebody to tell him this is wrong. And now suddenly when he becomes a superhero and suddenly starts to do good things, can that turn you into a good person? And I feel like that's an interesting arc for me. That's a character that I would like to see change over the course of the run of the series.
So makes me think of two different questions. The first question is from a perspective of Byron, because I don't know where you're going to go with that character either. If he's going to come back in,
He will.
Because you went to the idea of someone who bullied you on the bus. How would you think of that bully when he becomes a superhero?
Well, it depends. I mean, the one thing I would say is like one of the reasons I think it asks the question as to, bullies are predominantly survivors. Okay. Like they are strong, they are tough, they exist well, and they do well in the school world, right? Like they succeed, they're strong. And if you were going to hand off superpowers to somebody, you'd want to hand it off to somebody that can actually handle them. Okay. And that's the thing that I thought was interesting. It's like maybe you don't hand superpowers off to the person that is, like, for instance, when I was a 14-year-old kid, I don't think I would have handled superpowers very well. I think I would have been very meek, and I'd have been flying around going like, these powers are going to stop at any minute. I'm going to fall to my death. Like I had allergies and like that stuff. Like I was not a confident kid, and I don't know if powers would have made me any more confident. They just would have got me into more trouble. And so I thought that was something that was interesting to me. But yeah, I Byron's definitely going to play in there. I think the relationship between Dylan and Byron will evolve, probably in some very different and interesting ways. I guarantee it's not going to be the standard, bully. Is it bully and victim? Is that what the word would be?
Yeah,
bully and bullet? Yeah, I don't know.
I think probably victims. Where you go, the word victim, it feels a little strong. I don't know. Who knows? I mean, at that moment, victim is probably as strong of a word.
The other thing that I like about that is, like, because it's my book, I get to play with this. Like, it's going to be a complicated relationship. I had friends who were bullies, but they were my friends. Like I think that's what's so cool. It's like, it doesn't have to be like sort of like the black and white of it all. Like I really think Byron might actually like Dylan. And like, because even if you watch that first scene, he's like, I'm going to get you a date for prom. He's like, I don't want a date for prom. He's like, everybody wants a date for prom. So if he gets him a date for prom, maybe Byron will like him. So like, that's that thing of like, just because you say one thing, it just doesn't necessarily. So I like the idea of trying to make these relationships complicated and not black and white, and good guys aren't always good and bad guys aren't always bad. And that was the way I wanted to play with it. Because when you write a series like Power Rangers, the lines who are the good guys and the bad guys are pretty straightforward most of the time. So I felt like this is probably my reaction to that, of being like, I don't want to do that. I want to play outside. I want to color outside the lines a little bit.
So as Dylan becomes gains more experience as Rogue's son, okay? Mm-hmm. And as he is stopping and saving people and stopping the villains and becomes heroic, is there that point where he's going to click and go, this is my behavior in the past may not have been what it should have been? Does he get an aha moment, or is he getting kind of I enjoy the power that I do have, a bully plus power now, what I'm saying? Like, so how does he evolve based on this power that he gets?
That would be spoilers, but I will say this. I think his path is not going to be a straight line. I think we all have the capacity to learn from our mistakes and see the problems and things that we've done. But I mean, look, I'm very aware of some of the faults in my life, and because I've learned my lesson, but doesn't mean I keep learning. But there's many times I have to learn the same lesson over and over and over again, because I don't want, and I feel like that's something I think would be fun to see in a character. It's like, yeah, like he knows what he's doing is wrong, but sometimes doing the wrong thing is easier. And when you've had a long week, you want to do the easy thing. And also, I think people are incredibly good at justifying and rationalizing things. And when you save people's lives, here's the fun thing that I've sort of discovered as I'm writing it, is when you save people's lives, do you still see them as equals? And do you still see them as people that are worthy of your respect, or are they just people that need saving? Obviously, that's pretty dark, but I could see how, if you're in a situation where you're consistently doing this for the same people, it's like at one point it's like, Dio's like, can't you just save yourself? Or like, how dare you judge me for the small problems in my life when I save aren't I entitled to break a few rules if I'm literally saving the world? Like, I feel like those are interesting questions that I want Dylan to have to struggle with.
Yeah, there's a line of dialogue that I remember I remember from a comic of Batman Knight's End. Okay.
Mhm.
And the funny thing is, they never ever revisited that line ever again, or they never explored it. But I thought it was such an impactful line that I thought, what the fuck? You know, why didn't you never go back? The line was, Batman is coming back from the broken back, and he's on the top of, I guess, one of the gargoyles. He's about to jump off a building, or whatever the hell he's about to do. And the line is, God hates a coward. And now,
Oh,
now I'm thinking to myself, you're Batman. You're spending your entire life saving people who are probably not quite brave enough to protect themselves, right? Yeah. So if God hates a coward, and that's how you feel about it, how do you feel about the people you're saving, as you said? And that's the line that hit me, is like, wait a second.
I can see John Paul Valley saying that. Yeah. But Batman saying Bruce
Wayne is
but that's line. Awesome. Like, isn't that great? That's a great line. That's a like, because I feel like those are the reality, right? Like, look, I love Batman as much as any 40-year-old white guy. But like, I love that character, but like, he is impossible. He is not real. He is an idealization of so many different things. But what's so cool, and I think that's why you see so many like alternate reality versions of Batman, or like, you know, like, that's why he's such a fun character to go, like, he's got all these things, but this one little part of him's different than the regular Batman, and you can just see how they always turn into like a villain, or they turn into a crazy person, because you realize, like, he can't be all perfect. He can't be all knowing, compassionate, and like, he's a broken dude. Like, he's kind of crazy, but like just on the edge of crazy. And I feel like that's a really cool way to think about, like, God hates a coward. That's a great line. Like, you could do a whole issue about that. That's dope. I wrote that down. Thank you.
No, I'm happy to help. I wish I could remember the writer who wrote that line from that issue.
I'll look it up. I bet it's out there. I'll find it.
Yeah. But the fun that, once again, it seemed to insinuate a resentment on the part of Batman to not the villain, because you always think Batman hates the villain. That line implies that Batman hates the victim. Mm-hmm. You know, because once again, it's not just, well, it's hard to be a coward, or we got to protect the coward. It's saying that God hates a coward. That's beyond just, I don't like him. It's like, it's almost like a religious dislike for this individual who can't protect themselves.
Well, it shows an odd amount of contempt for the very people that he protects, or it shows the possibility of contempt.
Right.
This idea of, like, God hates you, so I have to step in and save you. Like, whew, that's complicated. I like it.
I'm saying, so yeah. So I mean, as you mentioned that about Rogue Sun, I was thinking to myself, well, that's an interesting thought. Like, at what point do you start resenting the people you got to keep saving over and over again? Yeah. Especially, like I said, if you go with the JJ, Jameson thing, where not only do they have to keep saving them, but they also resent you for even doing it.
But there's a reason that character is so beloved, because that means those characters are complicated, because, like, there's a contradiction in the way that they act. And so I think as a writer, it's always fun to try and find contradictions, because you have to figure out how to justify the contradiction, right? Like, it's like, oh, they do this, but they act this way. Well, then it's easy. A good person who does good things is easy to write because they do the same thing. But a bad person who does good things, or a good person who does bad things, those are more complicated. So contradictions are always interesting. And yeah, like, I think that that's a really fun thing to think about. Like, I've been, and it's fun. Like, I've been finding those as I've been going through it, because I said before, I think I owe it to try and tell a different story, or at least to try to tell a story that's not, clean and something you've already seen before. Like I said, there's thousands of, like, here's a perfect example. I can't remember that. I've never read that line. And I'm like, now I want to go find that Batman comic, but I thought I knew everything about Batman. So, like, I think that's really cool.
And I think what's kind of interesting, I mean, the name Rogue Sun is such an awesome name, right? So my question, you're welcome, but once again, it would hit me, because I tend, once again, as my background as an English teacher, I tend to read into, like, all the wording and everything else.
Yes,
the word.
I'm not being subtle there. Yeah.
Rogue Sun implies a potential thing about the suit, the power, maybe the use of the sun, so wherever that came from. Is the name Rogue Sun and the rogue part of that a commentary on either the nature of where the power came from, the nature of how humans have used whatever that is, or is this something that we're not allowed to talk about because it's coming down the pipe?
No, I mean, I think Rogue Son is, if you change the O to an N, I mean, sorry, the U to an O, like you kind of can understand what this story is about. It's about a father-son relationship or a father-son, dynamic, and that the expectations of parents and living up to those expectations, like, and the idea of not following your father's footsteps and how they would feel about that. Like, that's definitely what I'm going for with Rogue Son. Now, you could obviously play it the other way and like, a rogue son, like sons are stars are predominant. Most stars, I think, I don't know enough about science to say this, but I'm going to pretend I do. Most sons, I believe, are stationary. And so if one wasn't, that would be a very scary thing. Something very powerful and that moved and destroyed everything in its path could be considered a rogue son. So.
See, my brain went in a totally different direction. Like I got the rogue sons. I think what got me when my head was, there's a line in the I think it's the first issue towards the end where the mother of Dylan is pointing out that the stone will call the host when it's needed. In other words, the stone has a bit of a consciousness. And I thought I thought you were going with, I mean, I got the rogue son part as well, but the rogue idea that is it possible then the wielder of whoever got the stone is not doing what whoever the mind of the stone wanted it to do, which is why it went, the individual is rogue on the.
I think that's an incredibly possible interpretation. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, I think that's a very valid way to look at that story. Yes.
But
here's the thing. I think that the fact that you like the title, and I think the fact that the title has all these different, I love, like, hopefully two people on Reddit at some point down the line will have this same conversation 6 issues in, and they'll be like, look, it was in the title the entire time. That'd be wonderful.
But I mean, but we do have to make an assumption then the stone is either instinctually understanding where the danger is, or is it then a conscious entity?
Perhaps.
Okay.
Or we'll see. Like, it's definitely powerful and connected beyond just, it's not just a power source. I could say that. I think that's probably not spoiling too much.
And without, obviously, as we mentioned it, Dylan is given the stone by the will of his dead father. Without, again, hopefully not spoiling, or you're welcome to just say, can't answer it, but I'm going to ask it anyway, because it's what I do. If the stone then has a bit of consciousness, which is why I can guess things, know where the villains are, does it then have say of whether or not it wants a certain person then to get it?
I don't think it's like the Green Lantern ring where it's like you are worthy. I don't think that's the case. I think the thing that I don't like about that is it connects, it sort of suggests, like, here's the thing. When you say someone's worthy and the ring picks you, I'm just going to dissect Green Lantern because I can't get in trouble for that. That almost in a weird way, I think it sort of like sells the farm a little bit, where it's like, oh, well, then they are a good person and we have to trust that they're a good person because the powers that be have said so. And I don't want that. I want potentially the wrong people to wield the ring, or when they can't, like, what happens when they're wrong. If there's that's like saying, oh, God chose me, so that guy's a good guy. Well, it's more interesting if it's if I have a company that I'm going to hand off to my siblings, like if you're watching Succession, like, it'd be great if you could just ask God who you should give the company to, but it's a lot harder when you have to decide for yourself and the people around you aren't being disingenuous and conniving. And then if you give it to the wrong person, everything falls apart. I mean, that's why Shakespeare wrote King Lear. So, like, that's what I see. I find it more interesting when big decisions had to be made by mortals as opposed to something higher powered.
I enjoy that we're able to geek out with so many comic book references. Because one of the scenes that kind of popped in my brain when you were talking just now is Avengers 2: Age of Ultron, where the Thor hammer is, whoever is worthy.
Best scene in the movie.
And the fact that Vision can just pick it up automatically told everybody that he's the good guy. You don't have to worry about anything anymore because if he can pick up the hammer, he's good. Don't worry about it. The moment you said that about the stone and you didn't want to play that, I was thinking to myself, that's a good point. Because, like I said, that was an amazing shorthand in Avengers 2 to be like, I don't have to explain anything about his character. 2 seconds in, he got the hammer. You're fine.
Yeah. Oh, I think that was, I think even Joss has said that he was like, I needed something to unite the team going into the third act without it. So because they were at each other's throats the whole time, and the Vision was the easy way to do that. And I was like, oh wow. And that's why they set up that whole no one is worthy scene at the beginning. But like that's really smart. I think that's a great way to use that because you've only got a small amount of time. And you're like, why are they all going to follow this robot that literally tried to kill them 30 seconds ago? Yeah.
I didn't know that he said that. Wow. Okay. I didn't even know that.
I think Joss has said that was the reason he did that. I can't remember, but I'm not going to go, but you don't have to go look that
up. That's really cool. When the villain of the first issue, or the villain of the later part of the first issue, because obviously there's a villain that shows up in the beginning that you were going to find out more about later on.
Right.
Character Suave. Okay.
Yeah.
Who's a very interesting character. How much of his character are we going to come out? Because what's under we can learn more about what's his helmet. Obviously he's kind of a badass, but if he's hired muscle, then there's got to be a bigger badass behind the badass.
Yes, I think I always just liked the idea of doing I had this vision of a guy in a like the craziest, most outlandish suit you could come up with, wearing like a silver helmet. I just thought that was really cool. And I was just like, and the idea, and I always liked the name Suave. I just thought that was a cool villain name, and I was like, I like that guy. So yeah, Suave's in this character. You'll learn more about him going forward. I don't think he's going to go away anytime soon, because I have too much fun writing that character. Because I like sort of, I keep writing him as what's his name, Billy Eichner. That's the voice I hear in my head, is Billy Eichner as a supervillain. So if Billy ever hears this, I got a job for you, man. But that was the way I saw that character. There's a lot of fun stuff. I think that's a great thing about putting masks on people. Eventually there's obviously something very different about that, and the name I think also will hint at what's underneath the mask, or at least it should, if that makes sense.
Yeah, another interesting thing that you did, because there's a lot of tropes in the world of superheroes that you've obviously decided to kick and knock down a little bit.
Yeah.
There's once again the another comic book reference that I'm going to point out is I don't know if you're familiar with Terry McGinnis' Batman Beyond.
Mm-hmm. Very much so.
He has obviously the little brother, and he's got his mom. Neither one of them knows. The little brother thing figures out eventually, but mom definitely doesn't know her son is Batman. In Rogue Son, the mom seems pretty much aware of the whole Rogue Son thing from her husband, and is surprisingly cool with like the knowledge of she was married to an ex-superhero. So, what led you to want to make it that this time the mother actually does know who her son is?
I think what I liked about it was there's a monologue she has in the first issue where she talks about what happened between them in their marriage. And I remember working on a version where it was not explained, and it was more left to and I was just like, oh, it's so much more interesting if she knew. It's so much more heartbreaking if she knew and had answers as to why. Like it felt like I think I also didn't want to play the same story with Dylan and the mother at the same time, where if they're both don't know and then they're both dealing it with in different ways. Like Invincible did that very well, and I just didn't want to repeat that, I think. So that was my approach a little bit to it. It was just sort of like, I just felt like it was a little harder if she knew exactly, or at least thought she knew exactly why he left and what he was doing, and that didn't make, and then had to keep that secret from her son. Like that was even, you know what I mean? Like there's just like, whatever gives you the juiciest answer for, that's the one that's the harder when you're like, oh God, that's awful. Like that's the stuff, that's the one I'm always looking for. Yeah.
So as the mom, obviously moms are somewhat protective of their children, and you hope anyway that the mother would be. How comfortable is she with letting her son go out there and risking his life, knowing what happened to her father? And how does that interaction and conflict play out in the story? Where obviously, I mean, is she, hey, my son is a superhero, that's fantastic, save the world? Or is she like, God, I wish you hadn't done this? I mean, how does that conflict play out?
That's a good question. That one, I think, will evolve over time. Here's the other reason. The other thing is, I also felt like if we played the version where mom doesn't know, you're just playing Aunt May again. Yeah. And I didn't want to do Aunt May again. Like Aunt May's great, but okay, I'll use this interesting example. Like if you watch Breaking Bad, so let's gonna spoil everything. Let's just spoil every show we can think of. Let's talk about Kaiser Soze, do the whole thing. But with Breaking Bad, I always felt that when you watch that show, Skylar not knowing made her a very sort of unlikable character, or at least she became sort of this thing that was like getting in the way. She was getting in the way of all the things I wanted to see Walter do. But the minute she finds out what he's doing, she became so much more interesting as a character, because now she's trying to help him figure out how to work the books, and she's trying to figure out how to hide things, and she's seeing things that he's doing and going, why are you doing that, you idiot? And like, I thought all of a sudden but she could still have all the same issues she had with him. They could still play a lot of the same stories, but once she knew, it was more interesting. So to me, that's the way I look at it. Like, I think having mom know, being a part of that, like, she might see stuff that her son's doing and go, well, it's better than him putting kids in lockers. But also she loves her son and doesn't want him to get injured and hurt. So it's a balancing act. And also there's a line, I think, in the first issue that I really like, where she's like, I'm not going to pretend a math test is more important than saving someone's life. Like, I thought that was a smart thing too. If you know that your son can save people from danger, and you say no because I don't want to risk his life, well, then you're literally helping the person that's in trouble. Like, you're cursing that person, and like, you have to live with that. And so, like, I think that says something about her character a little bit, that she's willing to put her son in danger a little bit in order to help other people.
You know, it's such an interesting situation. I think because, once again, I'm a teacher in the day, and when you call the parent in, they're like, they're supposed to defend you and everything else. But I mean, as a teacher, they're supposed to be aside, with you against whatever the issue is. When you have the mom, there's a scene in the first issue later on where Dylan's already the superhero, but he's kind of forcing other people to do his work for him because he doesn't have time to do it himself. Mm-hmm. Now, as the mom, bullying is bad, but it does make good sense that he's getting his grades and he still can do, because he still has the time. Is the mother sympathetic to the cause of what he's doing, or is he sympathetic that, hey, that's really kind of smart of him to force these kids to do his work for him so he can pass and still be a superhero during the day? That's actually kind of smart.
This one I will say no comment on.
Okay. But and I also thought it was really interesting because, as we're talking about other shows, there's a show, you probably know Dexter.
Mm-hmm. Very well.
Where the sister, who's a cop, and supposed to be a smart cop or even a detective, can't figure out that her brother's the one killing everybody.
Right.
And after those, like,
every suspect we've looked at has died, and I can't imagine why. Like, yeah, I can't look at the guy next to me. Yeah.
Right. And you're like, by the third, fourth scene, you're like, are you a fucking idiot? What is your issue? And I think it's interesting that you're kind of stepping away from that and going, let's not make the mom an idiot. Let's not go down that road. And I think that's also why in the Spider-Man movies, the current ones, mm-hmm. It made sense that Aunt May knew. I don't know if I should have used the past tense, because it kind of hints at something for that character as well. Right. But it made more sense. I think I like the Aunt May knew in the Spider-Man movies versus the Tobey Maguire ones. Right. That she has no clue. I think it makes her, as you said, more of an ally in the story. It makes her more active instead of the whole, what are you doing? The same role of her, which is, oh, I thought it, or no, are you Spider-Man? That whole like silliness that tends to play over and over again. I think with stories about characters who are trying to figure out morally what to do and what the right decisions are, the more people you can put around them that know the situation and can like, I just go back to Batman Begins of it all. Like, what the best thing about that movie is, everyone around Bruce in the first half of the movie keeps basically explaining, like, he keeps getting bounced, like the morals. He learns morals from a gangster. He learns morals from his ex-girlfriend. He learns morals from who else? Roz. Like, everybody tells him, and what he does is he ultimately, and he makes so many stupid mistakes in the first half because he hasn't quite figured out where his compass is. And what I think what's so cool, like, that's what's so great about that film. We could talk about that movie forever, but like, that's what's so great about that movie, right? Is it takes the concept of Batman and goes, how does somebody who was broken by the death of his parents, how can they get to this weird equilibrium where they are both helping people and doing it for the right reasons, and what's great is you see that the reason Batman Bruce is the way he is because of the support system, whether it was on purpose or otherwise. All of these different people around him shaped him into the man that he is, and that's awesome. And it works best when they all know what he's going through, or at least they think they do. And so I would like to do something similar in that sense of, like, it makes more sense to put Dylan in a situation where he has a bunch of people around him who are all telling him to go in different directions, and he can't trust his own instincts because his instincts suck. And so him finding that, or his instincts are evolving and shifting because he's growing. I've always said this in other things, like, I love writing stories about teenagers, especially around the 17-year-old age, because it's such a wonderful age, because it's that one age, 16, 17 is like that really great moment where you've spent most of your adolescence where most of your decisions didn't really matter. You had to get good grades, but even your grades didn't matter. Your grade school grades don't matter.
No one tells you that at the time. But like high school is that part right around your high school grades start to matter. You have to get a job for the first time in your life. You get a car, which means your world opens up. You're starting to date people and get emotionally connected to people in ways that you haven't before. You're getting all of that. Plus, you have to decide where you're going to go after you leave and figure out what you're going to do for the rest of your life. You went from having no decisions to all the decisions. And so what's great about superhero books about high school kids is you can use the superhero stories and motifs of superhero to be metaphors for those life problems. And that's what I really like about that age. And that's why Dylan was such a fun character for me to play with.
Well, like I said, I think you did a great job. I was glad to read the first 2 issues. I look forward to reading the others. Can you give any hints of what the listeners can look forward to as they read the Rogue Sun stories?
Yeah, wow, I haven't done this yet, so I'll try to riff this off in a good way. Good job, by the way. These are great questions. I've done a lot of interviews recently, and I felt like I've answered the same ones like 5 times, and I was like, this was like, oh, these are new. I like this.
I appreciate it.
So thank you. But I would say that the first arc of this is really a murder mystery. It's who killed Rogue Sun and why. And are they coming for me? And I feel like that's the story that you're going to work into. And it's sort of about Dylan figuring that out. It's like, not only does he have to figure out his own power schemes, it's like somebody might be coming after me. And then, and it's going to be introduced. I'm a big fan of rogues galleries. So like, I want to try and build out the Rogue Sun and Rogue Gallery. And which is great about Legacy Heroes is you have all of the villains that took on, Marcus in the past. Plus there's going to be new heroes that Dylan deals and hopefully creates. And that'll be a lot of fun. So like, hopefully I'm going to try and build out a big rogues gallery. I even got my own sort of version of Arkham Asylum that's coming up, which I think is kind of cool. And then hopefully if we go forward, if the book keeps doing well, we'll get into more about how old Rogue Sun is, who have been Rogue Sun before, where the Sunstone came from, and what exactly we've been fighting against this entire time. So hopefully there'll be a lot of that stuff. So a lot of the first arc is sort of getting to know Dylan, and the second arc hopefully will be getting to know the world.
Well, it was Mr. Parrott. It was a fantastic talking with you. And when you're ready for the second arc, always you're welcome back on my show. Revolving door for you. Anytime you want to come in, stop by.
I'll take you up on that, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a fantastic night.